Let's see. So usually, first of all, thank you, Peter. Thank you, Constantine. I know doing something like this is a lot of work. I know very well, having done it many times before. And a year ago, when you raised your hand and had this idea, we immediately thought it was a great idea, and thank you for doing it. So in the last week, how many hours have you slept? 5 per night or total? Total. Believe me, doing something like this, especially the first time, is very, very difficult. So thank you. And let's see. I've prepared a plan for what to talk about. So I know for sure it'll be the wrong thing. You're the customers, you have something that you need. I tried to guess what that was and put together a bag of stuff. And maybe I'll do something a little bit unusual. Usually people give a talk, and then you have a Q&A, question and answers. Sometimes I like to do that in reverse. And so, what questions do you have? Or, again, even the word "what questions do you have" is not a great question, right? Maybe just, so we just got started. Constantine and Peter brought us all here, the Porsche Museum. There are Porsches being made here, right next door. Wow, that's very exciting, actually. I'd love to go take a look. So there must be something on your mind in general that brought you here, but also just right now, this morning. You had coffee, tea. Some people had wine last night. We had debates last night. In fact, I was in between two people. I won't say who you are. Talking about, how do you learn about lean? How do you teach about lean? How do you facilitate learning about lean? And so one of the real common questions came up, which is it better to teach the tools first and then the thinking? Or is it better to teach the thinking first and then the tools? And the debate went back and forth for a while. And I don't know, what do you think? Oh, here's a good thing. So how many, there's no test. How many think, at least this morning at this moment, you have the feeling, oh, I think I'd rather teach the tools first? Huh? Come on now. Okay, maybe 10 people. How many think, no, I want to teach the thinking first? Oh, wow, that's pretty good. That's about an 80-20 split. Or 80-10 split. There were 10 of you who said, I'm not playing this game this early in the morning. That's pretty. So maybe the other 10% was how about to do simultaneously? Because there'll be a problem either way. If you start with the thinking, you've got a problem. How do you teach it? And then what would you really be teaching if you were just teaching the thinking, right? What does that mean? Read books? On the other hand, if you just teach the tools, you start there. We all know the problems that can develop from that. So yeah, teach simultaneously somehow. All right, but that's then how do you do that? So anyway, that was a thought starter. That was a discussion last night. Anyone have anything else on your mind? Now, I probably won't change exactly what I was going to say, but I'll change how I would say it. I might just skip over a couple of slides. Anything? Yes, sir.
I was wondering, with you having so much experience, what do you think are the challenges ahead in lean implementations with all the changes going more and more into a society where you offer services and everything, and production is getting more and more concentrated and less dominant.
So what do I think, what might we think about the challenges?
Yeah, the challenges for implementing lean and what changes are in the approaches.
For implementing lean, given all the changes in economies, as many economies go from more production-oriented to more service-oriented, what kind of additional challenges might that present to us? Any other questions or thoughts? Yes. That's good. That's helpful.
Thank you. Would you think that the traditional lean thinking would be diluted a little bit now that there's the whole lean startup methodology, especially very common in the US and I think also in Europe now?
So as lean has, as the world evolves and changes, and economies shift more production maybe to manufacturing to more service, and people struggle with the same things we've been struggling with for decades, new things come up, new ideas come up, and that's wonderful. On the other hand, such as lean startup, which has a whole associated methodologies with it. And that might, I'm not sure how you feel about, oh, you're based in San Francisco, aren't you? So you're around that all the time. Yeah, so is there danger of lean getting diluted because of that, but also just because of everything that's going on? Another great question. And I'd like to get a couple of questions that I'll try to weave in through the talk. Yes, sir.
What are your thoughts about certification in the lean area?
Maybe I'll answer that one right now. So what are my thoughts about certification in the lean area? And that since we're here thinking about education, that's a question that comes up a lot as a very practical question. You know, people want certification. You know, maybe I won't answer it right now, actually, because it is you know, getting a degree from university is a kind of certification, right? And getting a high school diploma is a kind of certification. So it would be, you know, dishonest to say we don't believe in that to some degree. But I think we also, it's like, do you start with the tools or start with the thinking? And is there some kind of danger with dilution that comes from the lean startup kinds of ideas? The certification tends to lead one to think that there are some specific things you can learn, and now you're certified, and you can go off and you can practice lean. But I think one of the things we've learned is lean is truly about lifetime learning. And I think most of the people I know who've spent years learning it, maybe in the beginning they were thinking, hey, I would like to have a certification. It would help me sell my skills. But after a couple of years, that thought just kind of melts away. It doesn't matter anymore. The dangers with that, I think, are pretty clear. My bias has always been to steer clear of it. But I also, want to be open-minded and understand the fact that some people want that. Some societies, in fact, may almost need that. So I think that's one of the kind of questions that everybody should have as we think about what kind of education program or how to go about teaching lean in our countries. How do we think about the certification? So that was a couple to kind of get us started. That got everyone thinking a little bit. Okay, so maybe with that, I'll launch into just some thoughts. I don't know. I think probably you know the Lean Enterprise Institute. But one of the reasons we're here is because we did found 3 other non-for-profit organizations or partnerships, or help found them. One is the Healthcare Value Network in the U.S. Another is the Lean Global Network, which there are many of my colleagues here, 17 global institutes. And then also this Lean Education Academic Network that Peter mentioned. And here we are today, kind of these two coming together as we're thinking about education and we're thinking globally outside just the confines of the United States. Again, I think we have 17 institutes who have the aligned mission of taking responsibility to help their regions and countries through lean thinking and practice. So what is Lean, real quick, L-E-A-N, the organization? Peter introduced it. Maybe I'll ask Peter to say a little bit more. But the idea is, or has been, a vehicle to transform higher education along the principles of lean thinking. So that's pretty big ambition. And not just higher education, but all education. And it's configured as a forum for educators to share knowledge. So I hope everyone here will be doing this. Sharing knowledge and of how to better teach the principles and practices of lean. And it's a website, an email forum, a dialogue around curriculum, annual conference, and hopefully all of this will proceed further as time goes by. Peter, do you want to mention this? Here's a timeline of kind of how we got here today that I think Peter should quickly introduce. Now, I hope the podium mic will be working when you get there.
Yeah, so we have...
Can you hear?
Yes. Good.
Okay.
Good. So we have been at this since, as you can see, for quite a while, since 2001. We had a first attempt. And that was really about, it was in kind of a tag on to LEI conference, and we asked about 30 academics to come and meet after the meeting. And that was singularly frustrating event in that we spent the afternoon introducing each other to ourselves, and I didn't have time for much else, And it took a couple of years to recover, but we tried again in 2005, and we're able to get past the introductions. I think the reason is that we went beyond just academics. We asked some practitioners, particularly practitioners who were interested in teaching, to attend as well. And that was the beginning of this network. And again, there was lots of enthusiasm about the conference. Organizing, not so much. But as John pointed out, the real idea was promoting lean thinking and lean doing in higher education. And there was a lot to learn from what was being taught in companies. We knew that. And we wanted to the extent possible, extract that. And there's all kinds of, we teach in all kinds of ways, and certainly a big part of what lean is about is teaching and learning. So we wanted to exploit all of that. But the primary focus was, how do we get, our institutes of higher education better at getting these ideas across and in developing a workforce that was more capable. And I think that's the essence of it. John, can I just flip that over to you then?
Yes.
You got more to say on this?
No, that's no. Okay. Well, again, I think this is useful to think about what we're a group here now, and the opportunity to learn together, to work together, challenge things together is with us. So I think throughout the whole 2 days, to be thinking about that will be rich with opportunity. So a bit on the state of lean, and to briefly just think about the lean startup and things like that, and also the conditions that may be changing as far as how economies are changing. We do have big ambitions with lean thinking. I think everyone here does. That we're out to make the world a better place. And I truly think, this passes the red face test. That you say something that you don't really believe, your face gets red. I really believe that lean works with anything, that it makes things better for customers, for people doing the work, for companies, for societies. I really believe that. You put it alongside a lot of the changes, current concerns with environmental concerns. I mean, the ultimate lean enterprise is as green as you could possibly get. There is no excess, just enough. So the potential of this, I think, is huge. We've been at it, calling it lean for 25 or 30 years. I think we first started calling it lean 26 years ago. And for a few years before that, there was a lot of work taking place. But you could say that really we've been at this for about 100 years. This is 2014. Henry Ford's assembly line, creating flow production, was exactly 100 years ago. 100 years and 6 months ago, we think. And within 2 years, it was just all around the world. It had transformed so many things. But the last 25 years, we've kind of pulled a lot of things together, calling it lean, a lot of learning from, especially from Toyota, but other things as well. And I think in that time, we've won some battles, maybe even some wars. The auto industry, here we are at Porsche, the auto industry is not what it was when this word lean was first used 25 years ago. It is not the same thing. The difference in terms of just results, performance between Toyota especially, also a couple of the others, Honda and a couple of the others, was just astronomical in every possible way, right? And that's why the MIT researchers decided to give it a name. They gave it the name lean. I think many of us, if we could go back 25, 26 years ago and be in the room where they called it lean, we might say, well, let's think about what other word we might use to describe this. It's actually a very holistic thing, but it's the word we have, so that's fine. But the auto industry is not the same thing. I mentioned healthcare a few moments ago, at least in the United States and some other countries. There's been a boom of lean in healthcare. And as part of the service economy, there are a lot of economies driven very much by providing healthcare. And so what we've learned about how you can utilize lean thinking and practice in different settings, service, from the application in healthcare has just been phenomenal. A great surprise to me, I guess. I first had a chance to try to do a lean workshop in a clinic 15 years ago. And spent 1 week there. At the end of the week, there were 2 revelations. One was that, yes, this will absolutely work in healthcare. Number 2, I don't ever want to try to do this again. It was too hard. But there's a lot that's happened in the last few years. And so my experience of doing this or being around this in different industries, different settings, is at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter much what you're doing. At the end of the day, it all looks kind of the same. I should say, however, that's at the end of the day. Until the end of the day, there are a lot of things that are different because you have to solve the specific problems of that specific setting with the people who are involved there. So a lot of things change as far as how you go about it to some degree, but at the end, it's remarkably similar. And then there are the new frontiers. Again, whether we're thinking of lean startup, applications in software businesses or entrepreneurial enterprises, I find it very exciting. I'm completely on board and positive about it. But I do also share the concern of dilution. One of the things that I've tried to do, being at LEI the last 4 years, is do 2 things at once. That's always the hard thing, right? Teach tools or thinking. And there's kind of a tension that can sometimes seem to exist between the fundamentals, so there's no disillusion, but also wanting to experiment and try new things, new frontiers. And I really think and believe we have to find a way to do both. So I think it's great what the lean startup people are doing. It's exciting. They're bringing a lot of this, a new language. It's exciting. It's also clear that they're not getting very deep yet. So there's a lot of opportunity there for us to, I think, join hands, maybe teach or share our learning with them, but also recognizing that they're solving problems that were unique to them, that were born out of a slightly different setting, not in a manufacturing setting, but in trying to make new businesses. So again, the opportunity is rich. The challenges are not insubstantial, I think. We all know where the word lean did come from. MIT, IMVP, the machine that changed the world. They were at that time basically talking about the Toyota production and management system, also looking closely at Honda, a few others, but that's essentially what they were talking about. And a lot of people misunderstood, I think, the message over time, speaking about dilution, the message being diluted, also sometimes kind of getting just wrong or off the mark. There were a number of years where there was a focus on cost cutting. There was a sense that lean was something that you would simply use to downsize, to cut cost. It even rhymes with the English word mean. That's not too good. And people often still think it's just efficiency, or the opposite, that it's just people-centered. So back to that, do you teach tools or thinking? Well, you do have to find a way to teach both, because it is both. And the fact that it's both is probably the source of its real power. So how we can do that? It does mean system thinking, everybody engaged in problem solving, innovating. Learning to learn, both at the organization level and the individual level. And I think that's a reason that it's appropriate that we come together as educators to think about how we can facilitate a little bit better. So there already were, you talk about the dilution and lean startup and everything. Preceding what we call lean, there was also JIT, which just took one chunk. There was a TQM movement that was very soft. It talked a lot about the thinking. These two weren't put together very well. And all along the way, there have been kind of adjacent or rival movements like Six Sigma, business process reengineering, Agile, which is still around, although it's completely reconfigured itself from where it started 20 years ago. And then now we have lean startup and maybe some more. This will always happen. I think the resilience of lean thinking has been pretty remarkable. It's still there. It has the power to kind of adapt itself to different situations while maintaining this resilient core at the same time. But there is this, we do use this word, and it does give impressions to people. And also based upon conversations the last couple of days, I thought I would include this. I don't speak French, actually. There must be a French speaker here. Yeah. Would anyone like to just teach us how to pronounce it? Thank you, Georgia. Okay. How would you say it in German? So this is not a pipe. But Italian. Can you say Italian? Okay, so it's not a pipe. Actually, we probably have about 15 languages here, so we won't do them all. But it's amazing how we can call something a certain name, and it means different things to different people. And whatever we call it, or we use to describe it, and we use word questions like, do you teach tools first or thinking first? It takes our mind in a certain direction. And the reality is out there in actually solving problems on behalf of the customer, utilizing the talents of people in real time. That's what we're doing. Whatever we call it, then that's what we're doing. So if we're doing that, then I'm not worried about disillusion, about things being diluted, excuse me. If we're doing that, I'm not worried about the fact of being able to apply it in different settings, if we're doing that. So that becomes kind of a litmus test. So how might we think about this in education? And I'm a bit out of place here. I came out of the practitioner world with a little bit of experience in the university world, so I crossed that chasm a little bit. Many of you here do as well, or more so. So here's just a framework to think about what lean thinking in education, or at least formal education in universities. First of all, what about universities? I don't know about here in Germany. In the United States, universities, on the one hand, stink, and on the other hand, are the most wonderful places in the world. And if you spend much time in universities teaching, I don't know, Professor Ward at least is a department chair, and I know he fights many political battles, and he has a tough time bringing about any change in the university, but they're the most wonderful places as well. They're both at the same time. That the only places, in terms of being stink, sometimes they're so self-contained. In English, we'll call it the ivory tower, that they just don't pay attention to the outside world. And they're the only places, at least in the United States, I don't know about every country, where prices rise completely in a straight line, no matter what the economy is doing. Even healthcare or even government costs will at least modulate a little bit. Universities' tuition goes straight up. You can look over time. It's an amazing thing. It's probably not a good thing. So there's a crisis coming. And they're the most siloed, I'm going to say, having spent a little bit of time in a university, of all organizations. I think we know that actually silos are something we must work through in organizations to bring about a full change. And universities, I think, are the most siloed of all organizations. In fact, that's even part of the source of the strength of universities, because you'll take a very narrow discipline and go extraordinarily deep. And that's brought about some great progress in humankind. It's a wonderful thing. But it means these silos have tremendous difficulty talking to each other, working together. And lean requires that, right? Lean is a way of bringing that about. But they're also wonderful places. The products, that's you and me, us, usually exit change for the better and in ways that aren't easily duplicated through other experience. Somehow, through that 4 years or 5 or 6 or 10 years, you come out the end of, you can't point to one thing, right? But somehow at the end, you're a different person. You're different. So here's a framework for you. About 4 dimensions we can think about lean as applied to universities. One is there's the teaching of lean. So you can have specific courses. They might be in engineering or business or elsewhere. And perhaps some content diffused throughout the curriculum. And then there's lean teaching, which is how you would go about teaching, right? Teaching about lean and then how we go about doing the teaching. So that makes us think about overall curriculum design, I think. It makes us think about learning theory. How should we go about teaching this? Now, I added at the end of these two the words teaching process and learning process, because I know that that's what the next presentation is going to talk about, almost the same framework, thinking in terms of what's the teaching process, what is the learning process. I think that framework is very helpful, so I changed my words here a little bit. Now, here's one, because in a university setting, we also find, which I think when we think about public education, that Giorgio will talk about later, isn't necessarily there. But research like what is lean? How does it work? There could be surveys, there could be experiments, there can be action research, probably the best way to learn about it. And then there's also lean thinking applied to research. How do you make sure that any research we're doing truly has PDCA built in? Doesn't always happen. Then finally, this also will be the third one that Giorgio will talk about. There's lean, the administrative processes themselves. So lean administration, eliminate waste, if you will, or problems in university or public school administration. So revolutionizing the institutions themselves, in addition to teaching lean, teaching about lean teaching. So what do I mean when I say teach lean and have courses? So these represent departments, right? You could think about departments in silos in companies, or I have the production department, the sales department, the accounting department, and all that. Well, this is in a university. We have industrial engineering, mechanical engineering, operations management, finance, organizational development. So each of these could have their course, right? A course about lean. It's one way to think about bringing lean into universities. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a course that Mike Rother and I did together 20 years ago that kind of falls in this category. Here's another way to think about it, which is specific courses about these techniques. You could have courses about problem solving, about PDCA, design of experiment, system dynamics, supply chain, learning dynamics. So as opposed to thinking about individual departments, these could be courses on these core pieces of what lean is. So when I worry about lean becoming diluted, I think about, are these things present or not? Not just tools, are these things present or not? So here's another way to kind of combine that. Some of you are familiar with the chief engineer concept in lean product development. I think this might be an ultimate. So that in our existing departments, in our existing faculty in the university, we have run, instead of just a course that's isolated to talk about lean, we would have this thinking embedded throughout. What does this thinking mean? Essentially scientific thinking. So we're actually teaching science, we're teaching problem solving. So that's probably what we want to have as a product coming out of universities from a lean standpoint, I think. Not just that during college they learn about the Kanban formulas, but they come out of the university as thinking problem solvers. Then in our companies, as they go into their adult life, they have those skills which they can use anywhere. So that would be another way to think about what this might mean in universities. So some things we need, I think, and it's somewhat of a kind of a challenge for us here. One thing is we need additional success stories in universities and in public education especially. At least we have some things in university. We do not have enough good success stories in public education. So Ohio State University, Ansbach, is not enough. And I'm sure there are more people here and others that you know about, but we need more. Some of the famous ones in the United States, MIT, which came up with the word lean. There's not a whole lot of lean going on. No offense if there are any MIT people here. There's not a lot going on at MIT regarding lean. Michigan, inside mainstream curriculum, also, I'm going to say not a whole lot going on. But there are things there. Kentucky was famous for having a program that was sponsored by Toyota. That one kind of comes and goes over time. Cardiff was a great program. It was built up in the 90s, and not sure exactly what's going on there now. And UNA, that's a small one that most of you have never heard of. It's called University of North Alabama. It's a great example of an engineering department that completely reconfigured itself, rethought its curriculum based on lean principles. It's actually the only place I know that's done that. So we have some success stories out there. We need more really good ones. We also need some agreed models or perhaps just more experiments for lean learning and teaching processes. What are the dynamics that underlie what lean learning and lean teaching is all about? We need probably more complete curricula. Again, not just courses, not just isolated courses. Research, especially action research, but also other kinds of, I put in quotations there, academic research as well. So we can use research methods borrowed from different fields. ethnography, for example. So we think that lean needs to be understood holistically, therefore researched holistically. And last and first and foremost, it's just like in a company. And we think about how to go about bringing about lean change in a company. And you can start with Hoshin at the top. You can start with problem solving at the front lines. You can start in the factory. You can start downstream. Many places you can start. You can start teaching the tools. You can start teaching the thinking. But what you know, that the only thing that's going to make sure that's going to work is if you start getting some people there who become deeply knowledgeable. They become infected so that they want to know more, they want to learn more, and then they're not going to stop. That's the way you know it's going to actually take off and change an organization, a company. I think the same thing must be true for universities as well. So we need, first and foremost, forget all these other things of where to start, of courses and this and that. We need more deeply knowledgeable faculty, I think. So here's an example. Mike Rother, you're in the back there. You remember this 20 years ago? What? So together, we taught a course at the University of Michigan. So going back in history, I was going to look at a little bit going back in history and then current state, and then we can think together these 2 days about what a future state might be. This was the best we could do at the time. It was in industrial engineering, so I think it's not totally inappropriate that it's talking about lean manufacturing. Now we usually talk about lean enterprise and lean thinking. This was lean manufacturing. I had just joined there directly out of Toyota, and there was a course called Manufacturing Strategies, and the politics would not allow us to create a new course, which maybe that's the same in universities, you know. It's very difficult to create a new course in many universities. So we took over an existing course with the professor who owned that, a guy named Walt Hancock. We substantially altered and really just completely redid it as it was really a Toyota production system course, as best as we could teach it. It was a 14-week, 3-credit course. It was very popular. So I think the maximum was supposed to be 50 students, and there were always at least another 25 wanting a signature override to also take the course. So very popular, maybe the most popular course in the department at that time. Eduardo, do you think? Maybe. One of them for sure at that time. I'm saying it was the most popular. Demand consistently 100% of capacity. Students, and here's something I do know. Students would consistently rate it the most useful course of their 4 years at college. Students would say this. And one of the ways you knew this is that's the course they would put at the top of their resume. Maybe they only took the one course in the middle, but that's the one that goes up at the very top, because they know that's what companies are looking for. And what's interesting is that was what employers were looking for. So the fact that universities haven't actually embraced this a little more is interesting, because the employers want it and ask for it. The students want it and ask for it, yet universities have been very slow to change. So just for fun, I'll throw a hypothesis that I think these last organizations are the most difficult to change, I would say, will be universities because of the deep siloization. So I welcome anyone to prove me wrong, but the difficulty is there because that's what employers want, that's what students want as well. So Mike, these are the objectives from the course in 1994. So we just put it out there in all its problems or glory. Acquire understanding of what lean manufacturing is. Acquire an appreciation for manufacturing. We wanted people to like manufacturing. Manufacturing is good. At Michigan, so many of the students were graduating and going to be consultants or work in service industries. We said manufacturing is good. So that was an objective. To learn about and practice value stream mapping. To acquire the ability to quickly assess a manufacturing facility. So those were the objectives. And the focus of the course was plant floor manufacturing and management. Other systems would be brought in as appropriate. And we would go visit 3 different factories during the plant tours, and everyone would write up a report and things like that. That's what we were trying to do. So if that was okay in 1994, I don't know how many similar courses there may be like this today, but this is a historical perspective. The current state might look a little more like this. So how many of you went on the visit to Ansbach yesterday? So a few, and everyone else knows about it. So there you have somewhat of a different model, I guess. A learning factory with a didactic approach. I pulled this off the website. That learn through doing via hands-on participation in different roles on teams to develop and implement improvement ideas under the guidance of an improvement coach. So one of the things I think we know about how you learn lean, whether you're teaching tools or thinking, it's got to be learned through doing. Must be learned through doing. So even if we're in a classroom, we must find a way to make it hands-on, experiential in some way, and somehow blur the distinction between classroom and the Gemba, in real work. And here's just one slide, another course that some of you, I think, may go to the breakout session with Peter Ward, where he'll describe a course that they developed at Ohio State, which is a 12-month, 1-year MBOE, Master of Business and Operational Excellence. And it's got 8 4-day modules, as you can see, and it's got the objective of creating lean thinkers. So they have some selection criteria of who gets in, and they do projects with coaching, and it is a university, and so there are exams. So each individual, I think Peter will describe it, but develop a problem statement. They work through stability, flow, and sustainability in their project with some classrooms, some Gemba, a project, and distance learning occurring in a couple of different ways, but they're all actually working in their companies at the same time. So here, a very different model than what we were doing 20 years ago. And there must be more models out there. I know many people are already teaching, and I know some of you are thinking about how you would want to go about teaching it. And then there's research, more formal and informal. This is actually a paper. We think if we want to influence academia, if that's one objective, then one of the ways you do that is through having publications appear in prominent, very influential journals. So one of those is the Journal of Operations Management, and here's a paper that Peter and his student did. That's 2007. And there's an interesting fact around this one. Correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, but this is one of the top 5 downloaded papers from this journal, the Journal of Operations Management. That's pretty amazing. To me, one of the things it says is that academicians who are out there do want and need such research. So they go back to this one, and they really don't have that many that they can choose from. So we need, I think, more such research. But there's other ways. We can also share the research or the learning we're doing. I thought I'd briefly share something that the Lean Global Network has, which is it's news, so you might, one thing is to publish something in the Journal of Operations Management, which is probably a 2-year process, Peter, or if not. And another is places like this, Planet Lean. You can find it online. But it's a place where articles can be submitted, can be written, that can describe the kind of research experiments that you're running. Actually, I think the editor of that is here today. Roberto Priolo is over there as well, so feel free to talk to him. So back to the things for you to do. To find ways to deepen your own knowledge, first and foremost. And specifically then. So here's an idea. If you don't have a course, create one. I don't know, I think Mike and I learned a lot through creating that course and teaching it. It wasn't perfect in the beginning and probably not at the end, but we learned a lot. The Lean email listserv that you can all become a member of, LEAN, and the people you meet here can be sources of ideas about how to create a course. If you have a course, begin creating a program, something that's broader, more than that, more than just one course. And again, you can look at Ohio State, Ansbach, and there are others I think you can find where people are putting courses together for something you can think of as a more holistic program. And then we work toward the more difficult thing, which is how to embed Lean throughout the curriculum, find ways to infect our peers so that other faculty also become interested and want to learn about this. Creating industry partners, and I know both Ohio State and Ansbach have done a lot of that, because that's where so much of the learning and therefore expertise and knowledge is out in industry. So how can universities partner with industry and seek new methods of doing research? So not just things like surveys, but action research as well. And most important, find ways to deepen your own knowledge. I think this is ultimately the only way forward, that as we learn and learn through doing, then our learning gets deeper, we have different ideas, things to try, and we can start moving the field further. Recognizing that, this is not a pipe. It's a picture of a pipe. I can call it lean or lean startup, or agile. I can call it anything I want all day long. what is it really? What's the essence? Is that not getting diluted? Is that being maintained? Is, I think, the main point. A little more on just kind of what lean is. Again, I did a lot of this backwards, right? I asked for your questions first, and usually someone would say, here's what lean is, and then describe other things. So I'm putting what lean is at the very end. It's what I think it is. And it's kind of hard to describe because it's holistic. It's a lot of different things, right? One of the things it is, it's both people and process. So this thing, do you teach tools first or do you teach thinking first? Yeah, and you got to find a way to do both. And that's certainly a role of leadership. So social technical theory, has been around for a long time. I don't know, 40 years, more. So it doesn't sound new, but boy, actually applying it in the real world is new. And that may be the ultimate definition of a highly performing lean organization. It is truly a social technical enterprise. And I don't know, lean is very much about having good processes, right? It's very much about science, using science to design things that work. It's wonderful to be here in Germany where things work. Where I live, things don't always work. And so that's really nice. That's the technical side. And that leads us to always be teaching science. Or as here, we should teach, I think ultimately it's PDCA by any name. So as long as there's PDCA there, I'm not too worried about the dilution. But then what is PDCA and how do you really do it? We need to teach the art and craft of science. I think doing science, if you look back to some of the great scientists, for example, in Italy, they were craftsmen. So part of the science was actually the art of putting things together so you could run experiments. So I think these do come together, even as we call it science. It's not just a formula that we work through, but it's how we can bring that to bear in the real world. And science will give us a good technical answer pretty much always, right? We can send a man to the moon. We can make great cars here next door. We can design wonderful things that work. But making organizational change, I know everyone here knows that being technically right is only half the battle. And a lot of my engineering friends who work in organizations always forget this. They think, well, I have the right answer. That should be enough. Of course, it's never enough because of this other side, which is the people side. And you meet organizations, I'm sure you do as well, who are very heavily process-oriented, very technical, and others that are just so social that everything is a democratic process, so you can't even make a decision, right? So it's not just people-centered, it's not just process-centered, it really is getting those in balance. And you know what? At least I think, based on what I've seen so far, is that you never get them 100% in balance, but you always want to try to. You want to be observing that, watching that. So when we're too far on one side, we can make those simple little course corrections, always striving to be a balanced social technical organization. And what's going to allow us to do that? I have these two things there, one called management or leadership, and another called purpose. So if we have an agreed, aligned purpose, we have leadership management, fully understanding, embracing that, then there's a chance of actually putting into balance the people and the processes so that management can align people and process to achieve purpose. So doing that, we think, is the essence of what lean enterprise transformation is all about. And I'm going to jump ahead to something here. I'm going to suggest that leaders do that mainly by a couple of things. One is to get each person, let's say you all work for me, to take responsibility to solve problems and improve his or her work. So every one of you then, you're giving a process. You're part of designing it or it's given to you. And you're doing that process every day. You're doing that work every day. Problems crop up. You need to be able to identify when a problem has cropped up and then be able to attack that problem on your own volition and be supported to do that. And then as you're all doing that, all of you, not just some of you, not just a bell curve of those of you who have a lot of initiative do it and others don't, I need every single one of you doing that. So as a leader, that's my responsibility to get all of you working in that way. But in addition to each of you doing PDCA to make things better in your job, I also have to make sure that's aligned in the direction to provide value for the customer, prosperity for us in the company. If you're all just doing PDCA, that's good. You're doing PDCA, but it could be going off in different directions, yeah? So at the risk of oversimplifying, I'm going to say it comes down to these two things. Everyone is involved in doing PDCA, scientific thinking, solving problems, making improvements, doing innovation, everyone. And we're ensuring that that's in the direction that we need to go as an organization to provide value for the customers and prosperity for us as a company. So if we do that, we think that's a good place, and we have to begin. There's only one place to begin, and that's with ourselves. Because ultimately, there's only one thing we can change, yeah? And that is ourselves. Got about one more minute. This is an old slide that you'll see. It shows under the cartoon there, copyright University of Michigan. So, Mike, when was this done, do you think? Oh, okay, so that was 97. Okay.
It was in my chapter.
So you can see what it's getting at. It's got a roulette wheel, and you're going to try all the different tools and techniques. First question: where do you start? But even then, we recognize that there was the techniques, the tools, the underlying system, and there's an underlying thinking as well. The cherry picking the tools is not going to be enough. That the tools actually comprise a system. You focus on the flow of value to create that system, and that underlying all that is a way of thinking. Underlying the tools and system is a way of thinking, and you learn that thinking through doing. That, I think, is the only way. So the challenges are still there. We've learned a lot in the last 20 years, but there's a lot further to go. And thank you again, Constantine and Peter, for bringing us together and letting me share with this group this morning. Thank you.